We'll go to verse 17, and then we're going to go through, like I said, through the end of the chapter. Excuse me. And we're going to really back up. And I want to read verses 14 through 16. And this will kind of give us an introduction to verse 17. And we talked about this. This is kind of where we left off last week. Verse 14, he says, "The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all." What's that same event that happens to them all?
Death.
Death. You're all going to die, whether you're young, old, rich, poor, whatever, we're all going to die. And he goes on and explains that. "So I said in my heart," verse 15, "as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me." The me is Solomon. "And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever. Since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die?" He asks that question, and he answers it himself. It's a real well, the rich man dies like the fool does. They both die. No matter how much you got or how little you got, you all die. So he's making that statement, and he makes a statement in verse 16. He says, "There's no more remembrance of the wise than the fool." And, we understand that. We understand history. There's history about different parts of history. And the reason we know about it is because it's written in history books. If people didn't write history books, would you know what happened 200 years ago? No, you wouldn't know. If people hadn't written history books, and we mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again quickly. Lord willing, if the world stands, in 3 generations, my children's children's children won't even remember who I am. Think about that. Think about that. Same thing goes for Josh. He's 17, 18. Youngest one in here. You won't be remembered. So therefore, Solomon is simply saying, such as life is vain. Okay? In 3 to 4 generations, I won't even be remembered. And people think, well, that's kind of sad. In 3 generations, people won't even know who I am or that I even existed. That shows what? What does that show? What does that show? If in 3 to 4 generations, excuse me, in 4 generations, Owen, nobody won't even know who you are. What does that make you feel about Owen?
Nothing.
I'm not that important, in 4 generations now. I guarantee you, since my mom died, she died 2 years ago, I would venture, and I'm not judging, but I would say, and I don't know, I hadn't asked them, but I would venture to say not a one of my grandchildren has been by her grave. I'd venture to say that. Because they didn't know really that much about it. Same thing's going to happen to us. We're not that, and I think Solomon's simply showing that's just the brevity of life. That's just how important this life is. That in 3 to 4 generations, I'm going to be forgotten. It's not that important. But what is important is what? Where I'm going to spend eternity. That's important. Okay? Look at verse 17. He says, therefore, what does the word therefore reference?
The following verse.
The verse before. Since he came to the conclusion that there's no more remembrance of me, verse 16, as the fool dies, so does the rich man. Coming to that conclusion, therefore Solomon says, I hated life. because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the wind. He said, therefore, because I won't be remembered, and because I'm going to die, and maybe in generations to come I won't even be remembered, he said, I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing for me. What do you think he means by the work or the things that were done under the sun were distressing to me? What do you think he means by that? What was distressing about what he was talking about in verse 16?
Because it was all like worthless for him.
It was vain. That's what he said. It's vain. We give, every human being that's ever lived and died, and that's everybody. You live a few years, you die, you're forgotten. So, the question is, you spend all your time in this life, and you put all of your energy in this life, and you make this life your world, and you put everything in it, and then it's gone in a few years and nobody ever remembers you here. That's distressing, Solomon says. Therefore, it's worth it. This life, if it's not spent the way it should be, doesn't make sense. And then he goes on, and somebody read verse 18, let's see, verse 18 through verse 22. Somebody, if you would. Girls, we are in chapter 2, verse 18. Somebody read verse 18 through verse 22. Please, yeah, I'm sorry.
Then I hated all my labor in which I have toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or fool? Yet he will rule over all of my labor in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity.
I'm going to stop right there. What is he talking about in verse 18 and 19? Read it again, Chad. Well, read it again if you don't mind.
Then I hated all of my labor in which I toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over all of my labor in which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity.
So what is he saying?
That somebody else is going to profit from what he has done, and he doesn't know whether they'll continue to make it profit or will they just blow it.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say you own, and Solomon deals with this later on in the chapter. Let's say Sister Lizzie, we're going to put you in a very prominent position. You own Google, okay? Billionaire, got all kind of money. Now, in order for her to start that company and build that company, you think Sister Lizzie works 6-8 hours a day and then goes home?
She never stops.
Continual. The person who owns a company or a business, okay, as Solomon says, they don't sleep at night because their mind never stops working. Not only are you responsible for your family, but you're responsible for the people who work for you. And therefore, you're always thinking, how am I going to keep this thing running? How am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to provide for other people that depend on you, and so on and so forth? So it's a continual thing, and you spend hours and hours and years and years and decades trying to make this work. Then what happens is you die. Now here's the question. After all of those efforts and labors and stuff, you die. Kimmy, of all of that stuff that you've labored and died and worked and strained your whole life for, how much are you going to take with you?
No.
Zero.
You'll have a magnificent funeral.
Oh, yeah. That's true. That brings up a point. That brings up a point. Will you remember it? Will you be there?
I'll be there, but I won't remember it.
Well, all the great things, you know, that people say about you at your funeral. Oh, man, Daniel was such a great man. He did all these, he made all this money and blah, 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 and blah, all these kind of things. Will you know it? You ain't gonna know it. You're not gonna know it. I told Peggy, or I told other enough, I told Peggy, and I said, when I die, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go out and hire people. I want you to hire people. And I want you to give them money and I want it full. And when they start preaching and singing and all this stuff, I want people to just bawl and cry, fall out in the aisles. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, just weeping and crying and everything. I won't know it. I won't know it. I won't be there.
Don't worry about it, I got this.
So he's assuming I'm going for he is, I guess. But the point is that let's say Owen and Cadence, okay, we give them a little present a while back. Let's say they have a young son or a young daughter, and he's an entrepreneur, and he dies and Cadence dies, and they leave the money to their children. Do you worry about what your children's going to do with it? No matter how good they are and how you've trained them up, does your children appreciate what y'all have done and the sacrifices that y'all have made for that company or that business? Do they appreciate it? Do they understand it? And you give it to them? Do they understand all the things y'all went through? No. They didn't work for it. They didn't labor for it. I mean, you know, it's my son, Adam. And he worked with us for 20-something years. And I think I finally come to the conclusion he thought that when he got to a certain age, he was going to get, I was going to just quit and die and he was going to get it all, you know. Well, no, I'm not that important. But the point is, he may say, he says, this man ain't never going to die. This man ain't never going to die. I'm
Never gonna
retire, whatever. And the thing about it is that I've asked him before. I've asked him and I wasn't trying to be mean, but I've asked him before. I said, how much of this equipment or how much of all these things that the Lord's blessed us with have you paid for? How much of this have you paid for? And I was trying to get him to understand, if you get a little bit of whatever, the point is, you didn't sacrifice for it. You didn't sacrifice and all this other kind of stuff. And I understand what Solomon is saying. Not that I'm this, but I'm trying to help us understand that if you leave it, you work and you labor and you strive and do all of these things, then when you die, somebody else gets it, and there is no way in the world that they're going to appreciate what you've done or understand the sacrifices you've made. So the point that Solomon is making is, what good is it? What good is it? Because you're certainly not going to take it with you. You're going to leave it to somebody, and then you question, as Solomon says, what are they going to do with it?
Basically, Solomon is saying, under the sun, S-U-N, is pretty much vain in the end, but under the S-O-N is where you wanna focus at.
That's right. That's right. I mean, if you use what you've got, okay, and if you use the things that God's blessed us all with, you know, okay, say Lizzie owns Google, and she's got all of these big fancy things, you know, a yacht, and Kimmy and Stephanie ride on it, you know, they're having fun, they'll fish a little bit, and, you know, then she leaves it to them. What good is what I've got if I don't give it to the Lord? Now, I'm not saying don't pay your bills, but if what I've got, I use it to the glory of God to help people. That's what it's for. Then the legacy is, look at what you have accomplished spiritually and not physically with the things that you got. It doesn't matter if I've got $1 billion or if I've got $100. I use what I've got to the glory of God. That's what we do, okay? So therefore, anybody got a thought? Let's read verse 20. And the word therefore is another conclusion to what he has said in verse 18 and 19. Okay, go ahead. Anybody?
Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I have toiled under the sun.
Keep going.
For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. Okay,
and again, he continues the thought. He's labored his whole life for things, and he leaves it to somebody who hasn't labored for it. Will he appreciate it as much as that guy who labored for it? There's no way he can, okay, or she could. No way they can understand or appreciate it. So, get verse 22, and this kind of brings it to a conclusion somewhat. Anybody? Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I got lost for a minute.
22.
For what has a man for all his labor and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun?
Okay, so we'll get verse 23 too.
For all his days are sorrowful, and his work is burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This is also vanity.
Yes. So the point he's making here is this. You spend your whole life accumulating things in this life. And the point he's making is it's a waste if God's not included in what I'm doing. It's a waste. Let me ask you a question. Let's go back to Sister Lizzie. Let's say Sister Lizzie again owns Google, and Sister Lizzie gives millions and millions and millions of dollars. Let's say she's a member of the Lord's church, to the church. But she's still got millions and millions and millions left over in spite of the millions that she gives. And let's say Lee. Look at Lee. Let's say Lee is a pauper. He's homeless. But he's a faithful Christian. He don't have a job because nobody will hire him. Just plain. And Lee is faithful in his attendance. He's here every service. He works. He labors in the kingdom of God. Lizzie gives her millions, but Lee every Sunday morning during worship drops 50 cents in contribution. Who gives more?
It's the same, basically.
Lee
Well,
does,
you would say Lee does, but.
No, God says he does. Isn't there a parable? Isn't there a parable that Jesus gives of the widow's mite?
because she gave all that she had.
Yeah. These guys came by, Jesus says, and they dropped their big money in this pot. But this widow who came by, she gave a denarius, or a small amount. And Jesus says, that person, because of their poverty, gave more than all these other people. You see, it's not what I've got, it's what I do with what I've got. Now that deals not only with money, that deals with my time. What do I do? And that's something we all can think about. What do I do with my time? What do I do with my time? Do I spend it, and there's nothing wrong with sports or, video games and all these other things that I might do. But I want us all to think about this because this is so important. We talked about, having a bunch of money and you're afraid who you leave it with. But when I die, and y'all have probably done this too, when one of these celebrities dies and they got tons of money, you know what I do? I'll read their obituary, or I'll read what people have said about them. You know what they never mention?
Where it goes.
God. I don't think I've ever heard of where they mentioned this person, man, woman, was a faithful, godly Christian. It's about their accomplishments and all the things that they did. When I die, and this is something you and I can think about, when I die, and the preacher, or whoever it might be, stands before me, what will they say about me? Does that matter? Does it matter if Gary does my funeral? Does it matter what Gary says, or Rod does my funeral, or Chad, whoever else, any of y'all are welcome to. I like to have about 20, 30, whatever. But does it matter what anybody says at my funeral?
No.
Not unless it's about saving the other people that's there.
But no, yeah, that's a good thing. But it really doesn't matter what anybody says at my funeral, at your funeral. Don't mean a thing. Don't mean one thing. Because what matters is what God said. That's what matters. Not only what God, because God's not going to preach my funeral or yours, but it's what God knows. And what have I done? What have I done with my life? What have I done with my life? Have I spent my life? And again, I'm questioning myself. Have I spent my life in the service of God? Have I? That's something I can't answer you, you can't answer me. But have I spent it in the service of God? Because Solomon says, that's all that matters. Really. That's all that matters in life, is what I have done in the service of God. Because all this other stuff, this money and fame and fortune and all this other junk that the world thinks is important, don't matter one bit. In judgment, I'm going to ask a question, I'll get there. In judgment, when I stand before God in judgment, do you think the Lord is going to say, you was a multi-billionaire, you made all kind of money, and I'm so proud of you that you went to every University of Georgia football game, and you did all of these materialistic things. You think God cares about that? God cares nothing about football. God cares about your soul, and He cares about my soul. Yesterday, several of us would sit under the tent. We have a tent here and a tent here. Most everybody's sitting under the tent except Jason. He sunned himself. And
The unwise.
the unwise. But he did sit under this tent a little bit. And we would try to help people understand yesterday, a lot of us, a bunch of us would. Look, we're not here for that food you're going to get, and we're not here for that clothes you're going to get. That's not why we're here. We want to help people. We want to help people that are hungry and need clothes. No, that's okay. But we're not here for that, because that food and those clothes are going to be gone and they're going to wear out. What we're here for is to help you understand you have a soul, and your soul's gonna die one day, and all of this other mess and garbage, and not garbage, but all this other stuff isn't gonna matter a hill of beans. It's not gonna matter. What's gonna matter is your soul. That's all that's gonna matter. Because that other stuff really doesn't matter now. So that's why we have things like this as a congregation, to try to help people understand that. And you know, a lot of people will never understand that until they die. They'll never understand that till they die. It's too late. So, Darrell.
It's like a parable of the fig tree, Luke 13, verse 6. You know, the parable's about a tree that supposed to be growing, but it wasn't growing. The Lord said, I cumbereth it to stay in the ground. And then he said, give me patience 1 year for this. I will knead the roots and go around. In other words, I'm gonna try to work with this individual. That's what it's all about. It's not about the tree. I'm gonna try to work with this individual to get works, fruits from it, like Matthew 7:20 talks about. And then, if after a year, it hasn't produced, I hope, so be it.
Yeah. Give it time. And that's what we're here trying to, as a congregation, to do. Anybody else got a thought? Now, he changes subject, he changes ideas in verse 24 somewhat. He talks about having things and leaving them to somebody that, you know, is not going to use them wisely. He talks about the difficulties people face with, you know, trying to make a living, and then you may leave it and so on and so forth. But somebody read verse 24, somebody besides Chad wrote, and I appreciate Chad. I know we got more literates in here than Chad.
Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God.
Right, what, so he talks about laboring and spending money and all this other kind of stuff, then leaving it to someone, which he said was vanity, but he changes an idea, Owen, and he says, nothing's better for a man than he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. What does he mean? What does he mean? We should enjoy good in our labor. What does he mean?
Enjoy the good of what we bring to others in our own labor, because when we're gone, it ain't gonna matter.
Okay, but
I mean, you can take it on back. up
He's
in
saying
there.
you should enjoy the fruit of your labor.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
what you- yeah.
yeah. Let's say, I'm gonna bring Owen up because he read it, and
Sit on the balcony.
he is a motorcycle man. Is there anything sinful about a motorcycle?
No.
No. If there is, I should repent, because I've had a few, okay, in my younger days when I was Owen's age, a little older. So there's nothing wrong with that. Is there anything wrong with Owen, and we'll ask Kaden, buying a motorcycle? Okay, no, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if Owen has to mortgage his house to buy it, that might be a little different, you know. But the point is, there are things in life, there's nothing wrong with them. You know, God says you earn, you make money, and you use it for good things. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what Solomon is saying. As long as we use it wisely, okay? So he says there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. There's nothing wrong with going to sporting events. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with enjoying family and friends and doing other things. There's nothing wrong with work or labor. There's so many things in life we can enjoy that there's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. Unless we put it before God. Okay? So read verse 25. Somebody. And now Solomon talks about himself. Verse
Who can
25.
eat or who can have enjoyment more than I.
Okay, so who's he using? Who's the I? Himself. Who can eat and drink more than I? Solomon says he enjoyed life. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But get verse 26, Owen, if you don't mind.
For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind.
Okay, two things in here. He gives two scenarios. One for the good, and you got, what do you read, King James? New King James?
King James.
New King James? Okay, somebody read, if you got a King James or another translation, verse 26.
For God giveth to man that is good in his sight of wisdom, and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he giveth trouble, to gather, to heap up, that is he may give it to him that is good before God. This is also vanity and vexation of the spirit.
Okay, ma'am, okay, yeah. We're in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Okay, just a minute. So he uses the word to the good man, he gives the word good. But to the other one, he uses the word, and the King James doesn't use it, he uses travail. Right? Anybody got a King, is that right? Anybody got a King James? Travail? Anybody got a King James? It says travail, right?
Yes.
Okay. So to the good man that God approves of, God gives him a good life, right? Now, why is it that God gives a man a good life that obeys him? Why is it? What's the difference between a faithful, godly man or woman? What's the difference? Why is their life good?
Because they're doing everything the right way.
They're doing it all the right way. That's exactly right. When a person obeys God and they follow this book and this manual, there are no regrets. You know, when a person's a faithful Christian, a godly woman or a godly man, they go to bed at night with their head on their pillow and they sleep greatly. Because why? They know they've given that day to God, and they don't have to go to bed at night thinking, or waking up the next morning thinking, man, what did I do? What did I do last night? What did I do? Wake up thinking, I don't even remember last night. I don't even know what I did. You see the point? The godly man, the godly woman, if they're faithful to God, their life's going to be good. It's going to be good. But the one who's not godly, their life is going to be travailing. Or in other words, their life's going to be hard and difficult. Why? Because they don't follow this book. They don't follow this book. People think, and I'm not saying all people, but people in the world think, and raise your hand if you think I'm right. And I'm not always right. I'm wrong a lot. But I want to ask you a question. Do most people in the world who aren't Christians, I'm talking about faithful Christians, because there are people in the world who are Christians, but they're not faithful, right? Everybody agree? A person that's a faithful Christian, how does the unfaithful Christian world or the non-Christian world look at the Christian? Do they think, and raise your hand if you think this is true, do they think that the Christian, the faithful, godly Christian's life is boring?
Some do.
Raise your hand, raise it high if you think they think it is. Yeah.
Depends
Yeah.
on who they are.
They think, well, if a godly Christian, there are things that a godly Christian cannot do and will not do. There's things they won't do.
They just refuse. Yeah.
They will not do it. And there's things that a non-Christian will do. I'll give you an example. Who loves to come to worship every Lord's Day, every Lord's afternoon? Who likes to come to Bible study? Who does that? Raise your hand. I love it. It is a blessing. It is a joyous, wonderful privilege that God has given His people. That is a blessing.
Amen.
Okay? But there are people who go to church, denominationalism and others, who go to church once a year. You know when it is?
Twice, Easter or Sunday or Christmas.
Today.
Yeah.
Today. They go to church today. You know why people of the world and non-Christians, do you know why we had 37 cards filled out yesterday for the community day? 37 cards. You know how many people were here yesterday? Probably, this is an estimate, Rod, and Gary and Chad, the rest of y'all can help me. I'd say, brother, probably 60, 70 people were probably here yesterday. That includes children and so on. That came through this place. How many of you think is going to be here today? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not judging. I wish they'd all be here. But the point is that people don't see the need for God. They don't see the need for God. The majority of the people in the world don't see the need for God. They don't come to worship services, and I'm not judging, but this is a fact. The majority of people don't come to church services, worship services, because they think it's what? Starts with a B. Boring. We gotta sit for 30 minutes to an hour and hear that Rodriguez preach. Oh, brother. You know, then we gotta sing songs and all this stuff. It is so boring. And, you know, then the reason we don't come to Bible class is because they got this guy up here and he talks for 45 minutes. And then, you know, people want to talk and I can't get out quick enough. And I've wasted a whole 2 hours at church. Now, I'm being facetious, but that's the way people look at it in the world today. That's the truth. But they don't understand. There's a judgment coming. And there's an eternity coming. And there's something, I'm gonna get you, brother. There's something that I was talking to Rod yesterday, and there's something, there's a brother we're trying to get here. His name is Dave Miller, and he wrote a book years and years ago, and he wrote another book called Piloting the Strait. And the world has so changed the meaning of this book. They have watered this book down so much that this book does not mean what it meant 30 years ago. That's the truth. It's got to the point to where liberalism and socialism and culture and society has changed the meaning of this book so much that instead of using doctrines of God, they use the doctrines of men. And they've inserted the doctrines of men instead of the doctrines of God, and it doesn't mean anything.
So
It
you're
doesn't
taking
mean.
it out of content, or are they just?
No, they just added doctrines of men. Let me
Reading the book.
give you an example. Last night, I was on YouTube, and I discussed, I've told you all this, I discussed stuff with people on YouTube, and a guy mentioned his doctrine. He was a religious guy. He mentioned his doctrine. And I texted him back, and I said, well, what is your doctrine? What does your doctrine say about baptism? What does your doctrine say? And he takes me back and he says, baptism doesn't save anybody. Baptism is a outward showing of an inward grace. I said, well, I texted back and I said, well, here's Jesus's doctrine. Jesus's doctrine says baptism saves us. Mark 16, 15, and 16. That's what Jesus' doctrine says. Where is your doctrine in Scripture? I still haven't heard from it. Because it's not there. It's not there. So they've changed it, and we got, Gary, I'm gonna get you, because we're about running out of time. Go ahead.
You know, it's just like Community Day. It's like 3 o'clock class, the 4 o'clock class, the Bible study at 9:30, 10:30. If I don't come to any of those, I will give you my promise, my light will go out. We are all like embers of coal in a fire. And if you put one of those embers to the side, the fire will continue to glow that are all together. That one will go out. And I couldn't think of a better place to be, my soul would rather be, than right here with God's people. Because I feed off of everybody. I enjoyed the fellowship like we did yesterday. I enjoyed the fellowship when we made the visit. I enjoyed the fellowship when we go to the Jockey Lot. I enjoyed the fellowship and learning at the 9:30 Bible study. And I enjoy the worship to God at 10:30. Then I look forward to the afternoon classes as well, because this is where my soul wants to be. And if your soul don't enjoy the services of the Lord and you think that they're boring, well, you won't like heaven, no way.
Yeah. Do you know, and going to just feed to that, and we'll close. Do you know what this is? You know what Bible study and worship and, I want to say something about them two people back there. We can pick on them a lot. But they are new Christians. They've been here 2 months, 3 months. They obey the gospel. And I don't think they have missed a Bible study, a 3 o'clock class, a Wednesday night since you've been here. And that's awesome. That for all of us is fuel. It's fuel. Bible study, worship, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, Wednesday, all the other things that we do, that's fuel for the soul. And if you ain't got fuel, what's gonna happen? It's gonna burn out. I remember we used to have a fireplace. We built a house down in the country, and we had a fireplace, and I loved it. Peggy loved it. You take a ember of wood out of that fireplace, and you set it to the side, it ain't gonna be long till that ember's out. Because it's taken away from the main source of fuel. That's why we need to stay close to one another. Because we get fuel, we get strength and encouragement from one another. So we didn't finish, but I'd like to encourage you, we're going to finish and get into chapter 3 next week. From about verse 1 through verse 10 of chapter 3. We're not going to look at that because perhaps it's pretty simplistic, but we'll go into the other parts of the chapter, okay? Thank y'all.